Hello, everyone. This is a presentation from last year. I did my research last year on the US school system and mental health, and I'm going to talk about the topic, I think, in this presentation today. Um, Part of why I want to share it is because I want this to be, I think, an example of what you could do. That's not to say you have to do everything the exact same way, but hopefully this project can give you some more ideas about what you want to do with your own project later on. One more thing. You might have noticed my voice is kind of shot right now. This is actually May when my allergies get really, really bad. So if I sound like a dying horse, that is why. Don't worry, I'm very healthy. I'm gonna take my meds tonight, and hopefully this will be better in like a week or so. But sorry if my voice is kind of shot right now. All right, you know what? Let's get into it. Let's go ahead. This is how depression feels for me, like water breaking over my head before it buries me alive. It feels like spiraling. It feels like drowning in a sea of anxieties, a boring lesson, an awkward interaction, a stutter that doesn't ever go away. And although we often pass each other in the hallway too fast to actually check in, I imagine this is how it feels for a lot of you too. Numbers don't lie. 1 in 5 students show signs of mental health disorder every year in the US. If you do the math, that's at least 100 people at LPS. We're facing a crisis of mental health in our schools, and we need to talk about it. My question today is, how does the US education system impact mental health in schools today? I'm going to provide some background on the system first, then I'll talk about how I think social, economic, and political factors all play a part in the issue. I'll talk about 3 key ideas. And finally, we'll talk about what the research shows and what we can all do to address the issue together. Before I move on, here are 2 terms I'll be using a lot today. Mental health just means our physical, social, and emotional well-being. It's really important to all of us as we live our lives. And when I talk about system, I'm not just talking about the rules, I'm talking about how things work at a deeper level. That includes the underlying values and priorities that our current government and our school system cares about. Excuse me. So here's a little bit of background. Here's a little bit of background about the U.S. education system. We serve over 50 million students nationwide. Over half of those students are students of color or come from low-income backgrounds. And if you look at the numbers, once again, a lot of these students are struggling with mental health, up to 1 in 5, according to a study by Reiser Kozitsky. Now, I got to look at the issue through my research, and here are 3 things I learned. I want you to meet Katie. Katie is a student at LPS. She's a sophomore. Things have been going, I think, pretty hard this year for her. Some family trouble, I think some academic stress, and she's been having a really hard time mentally. Um, and when you look at her issue, you see, I think, a lot of reasons why Katie might not be getting the help she needs and deserves. Here is my first point. In schools in America, there are a lot of challenges and there's not enough help. Let's go back to Katie. Let's say she goes from being on the honor roll to failing. Her teachers, I think she doesn't care about school, so they begin, I think, neglecting her work. She begins, I think, putting on weight because of the stress, and so other kids begin making fun of her and gossiping. And the thing is that when you're in school, like Katie, school and home, I think, like sort of go together. If you have, I think, stress in one area, it's really easy for academic and social challenges to multiply for students. This is based on real interviews from, I think, students in NPR. And then let's say you're a teacher and you see Katie in your classroom. Maybe you don't see what she's going through, but maybe you do, and you still might not be able to help her. And here's the problem. Researcher Susan Rice talks about one aspect of teaching that's really hard, and the fact is that you have to juggle rules that often conflict with each other. For example, when you're trying to help Katie, while you also have, I think, a class of 30 people, it's really hard to do both these things at the same time and do them well. And it's really important to talk about these challenges because we are the community that we want to be. Students, teachers, adults, we all play a role in building a healthy school community. But sometimes the truth is, in American schools, we have a lot of problems and we don't have enough help. And that brings me to my second point. When I was looking at my research, one thing I learned is that we don't put enough money into schools. There isn't enough money to get school staff in roles where they can actually promote mental health for students. Take counselors. Did you know that nationally there's only one school counselor for every 482 students? I mean, Imagine Miss Holguin or Miss Guevara doing everyone's job in the counseling office, and you begin to see sort of why so many schools struggle to support mental health. And even when there's additional money for staff, that money doesn't always actually go towards hiring more staff. For example, last year in Texas, the state government actually invested money into mental health programming for schools after a really bad school shooting in Santa Fe. The problem was that school boards and politicians sort of got stuck in a debate about whether they should spend that money on actually hiring therapists and counselors or towards building more metal detectors. And I think these debates about money often make it harder to employ staff. That brings me to, I think, my third point. I think at the level of government, there's a lot more our government could be doing to think about the issue and actually address it. Unfortunately, our current admin may only make the issue worse. In the past, the White House proposed eliminating over $1 billion in funding for school safety and mental health. Just last year, Betsy DeVos, our current Secretary of Education, released a report that recommended schools focus on things like building better fences and stronger windows. Once again, talking about the physical solutions and not really the human solutions. On the other hand, you do have solutions coming from states like New York and Virginia. And these two states actually began to incorporate mental health into their curriculum for all high schools in the state. You could compare this to existing public health programs that already teach kids how to do things, I think, like, detect cancer and drive safely, and think about, I think, their physical health. And the thing is that if schools can begin thinking about mental health like any other kind of health, it might be a lot better for students and teachers. So that is one solution that does have a little bit of hope. So now that I've gone over these 3 points, here is what I want you to know. The first thing is that we have a really hard school system. There's a lot of stress, and that's real. The American system creates a lot of stress for a lot of pressure for students and teachers without offering the same amount of help to actually deal with the resulting mental health problems. And that leads me to, I think, my solution. If we want to address mental health in schools, we need to invest more. We need to invest more in programming. We need to invest more in mental health resources. And we definitely need to invest a lot more in improving the connections between students and adults in schools. Because ultimately, those relationships, I think, are where students, I think, and adults can get the most help. In the future, I definitely want to learn more about this topic. One thing I didn't find a lot about was the impact of race, class, and gender, which are all really important to mental health. So hopefully there's more out there. And the other thing I want to know more about is what are the actual solutions, right? I don't know that I heard of a lot of schools that are actually doing a good job of, I think, addressing mental health right on. So I'd love to think learn more about schools that are doing a good job of actually addressing the issue in their schools. Guys, I'm not gonna lie. I still have really hard days. I still have days when it feels like I'm 6 feet underwater and there's no one to see. And that's when I have to remind myself, people like us fought for a world where we could actually exist. People like us are still fighting for a world that needs our voices, our vision, and our wisdom. And when we stand together, when we face those waves of stress and doubt and uncertainty, those big waves don't feel so big anymore. Thank you for your time. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have questions or comments, please email me. And if you want to read more about this topic, here are all of my sources for your reference. You can find this on Classroom as well if you need to look later on. All right, that was my presentation. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I have not done it in a while, so it's a little bit rusty. But now that you've, I think, watched this, you can go back to, I think, your lesson plan. Go ahead and answer the questions on your page, and then move on to, I think, your second presentation.